All right, I got to bring my panel in because it's a good one and there's a lot to unpack. MSNBC legal analyst Nick Ackerman, a former Watergate prosecutor, and Donna Brazile, former chair of the DNC and author of the new book, it's probably on your Christmas list, Hacks, the Inside of the Break-ins and Breakdowns that put Donald Trump in the White House. And Evan Siegfried is a Republican strategist, and he brought me a bottle of wine today, so I'm considering letting him go first, but I can't because there's too much news, and I got to go to Nick first. I didn't say you were that nice. Oh. All right, Nick.
Yes.
We got to start with the president's lawyer, John Dowd, telling NBC, quote, "The president cannot obstruct justice because he is the chief law enforcement officer under the Constitution's Article 2 and has every right to express his view of any case." Is that true?
That's absolutely false. It all comes down to what was his intent in talking to Comey and telling him to stop the Flynn investigation. I mean, there's no question. John Mitchell, who was Nixon's attorney general, who was entrusted with enforcing the laws, was convicted of obstruction of justice. That is a ridiculous defense. It has never been raised before. It will never pass muster with any court. It all comes down to whether or not Donald Trump had a corrupt intent trying to stop the investigation when he told James Comey to stop the investigation. But all of this is smoke because the real investigation here, the real indictment that's going to come out, has to do with a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russians in order to throw the election to Donald Trump. You can see that in the Flynn plea. The materiality for that false statement has nothing to do with anything but the collusion allegation between the campaign and the Russian government. And going through all of this are the emails that were stolen out of the DNC, starting with Papadopoulos knowing about this in April, going to Goldstone telling Don Jr. that he was going to show up and give him all these emails, and then having them all go on to WikiLeaks and to Guccifer 2.0, looks like through Roger Stone, based on what we know. What we're seeing is a major conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russian government that is starting to come into shape. The obstruction is just part of it. It's the motive why they're obstructing justice.
We can debate whether or not President Trump's tweet is a tacit or kind of sort of admission of guilt, because that's one where you're going to hear whatever you want to hear.
Correct.
But why would the president put it out there to begin with? I mean, think about the hot water he could be in, or even his family members. Why would he put the tweet out?
Because he can't help himself. Look, every time
in a nutshell.
He can't help himself. Look, I waited all Friday afternoon for the president to tweet something out, because this guy, when it comes to tweeting, he's a master of the 140, now 280 characters. But he waited. He waited to get what I call the right temper, because he puts a little bit of hot sauce every time he tweets. He wanted to put a dig out there. I don't think a criminal defense lawyer would have drafted a tweet that would have put this president in more legal jeopardy. I think every time the president tweets, injects himself into this investigation, he contradicts himself, and when he gets caught in a big ball of what I call mess, he then, distracts and say, but what about Hillary? Come on, this is not about Hillary Clinton. This is about Donald Trump. It's about his campaign. It's about the obstruction inside the White House. And it's time for the president to get out of the way and let Mr. Mueller finish his investigation.
Well, what do you think about this argument that Dowd has that maybe Dowd wrote the tweet? To me, it doesn't matter who drafted it. President Trump's name is on that tweet, and it was Sean Spicer who said, consider those tweets official statements from the White House. Who cares who drafted it? Your word is your bond.
For intent. I think what John Dowd is doing, regardless of who wrote that particular tweet, is trying to go out and say, well, we don't know who's writing all of Trump's tweets. Dan Scavino has access to the account. I have access to the account. If you can take away the president's tweets, which are his greatest liability, as a legal argument for intent for whatever he did, it's a smart legal play in my book. I'm not a lawyer as well, so I'm very thankful for that. But on the what about Hillary?
I do take umbrage on that. I mean, the law is extremely clear. When a lawyer says something on behalf of his client, that's an admission for the client.
But he didn't say it on behalf of the president. The president said, I mean...
He said it himself, that's right. But the fact that the lawyer wrote it doesn't make any difference. It's zero.
But you're forgetting that impeachment trials are political trials, not criminal. And on the Hillary thing, remember when O.J. Simpson's defense team said, what about all the other murderers who are not getting convicted and prosecuted? That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whatsoever. What is going on with President Trump is he's being investigated by the special counsel. Sarah Huckabee Sanders said on November 3rd, 2016, if you're under investigation and you're attacking the FBI that's investigating you, you're losing. And that's exactly what President Trump is doing. I wonder if Sarah Huckabee Sanders will go to the podium today and say it again
He's
today.
attacking the integrity and the professionalism of the FBI. Just a couple of weeks ago, he called the members of the intelligence community hacks. I mean,
okay, but that's not new.
No, I know, but he's attacking the people that work for him. They work for the American people.
He's been doing that since day one.
I understand, but this is something troubling about a president who ran on the quote-unquote law and order platform is now undermining and undercutting the FBI and this criminal investigation.
And it all takes away from the big picture, which is there is a conspiracy that is going to be proven
but Nick,
that they're investigating.
President Trump wants to take us away from the big picture.
Of course.
Does this end up, though, he said?
No.
Since James Comey's claims, President Trump is saying, never did it now.
No, not at all, because you have to look at all the corroborating circumstances that support James Comey here. He has contemporaneous notes. Trump has no contemporaneous notes. Trump admitted to Lester Holt that the whole purpose in firing Comey was to get rid of the Russian thing. He admitted it to the Russians. So when you're a lawyer and you're prosecuting a case, you look at when you have two people who give two divergent stories, what you want to argue to the jury is, what is the corroborating evidence that makes the government's witness credible? Here, the corroborating evidence on behalf of James Comey is overwhelming.
All right, well, help me understand what counterpoints work, right? Right now, Trump team wants to go after ABC News and Brian Ross as a great deflection point.
Yeah, well.
But how about this Washington Post revelation that one of Mueller's agents had sent anti-Trump tweets and Mueller had to take him off the Russia investigation? How much of an issue does this end up being? Is it a real problem? I mean, Mueller took him off. He moved the guy. I think he's in HR now. But is it a real problem?
I don't think so. Look, I think what Director Mueller is doing is making sure that this investigation is conducted with the utmost professionalism. He was right to remove him. I think what Donald Trump does on a daily basis is try to figure out how to muddy the waters, how to include more people so he can distract and distort, and then, you know...
It works.
It works temporarily until he contradicts himself again. And that's why I think Donald Trump is in a lot of trouble today because of what he did over the weekend. He should have just quieted.
Mueller's move is actually really a net positive because it shows that he's putting the integrity of the investigation. And these weren't even tweets. These were private texts. And legally, you can have a political opinion privately. When the private text came to Mueller's attention over the summer, he said, "You're out." That no ifs, ands, or buts. Why? Because he wants this investigation to be as above board as possible. You can't have its credibility and impartiality questioned whatsoever. And Robert Mueller was right, and it was smart for him to do it.
All right, Nick, then split this up for me. When President Trump muddies the waters and adds the tweets and the confusion, I think it helps his base. It even helps average Americans that hear so much noise, they start to tune it out and say, just remind me when it affects my taxes or my health care. But from a legal perspective, is Donna right in terms of this is a short-term win in terms of how people feel about President Trump?
I think it's a short-term win, not only from a legal perspective, but also from a political perspective. When the major indictment comes out here, which it looks like it's going to, when you have a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russian government to throw the election to Donald Trump, as Minister Flynn's own assistant said, right? And you have all of this evidence now coming out across the boards, going from April to June to July to August, and you know that the conversation between Flynn and Kislyak related to this conspiracy, even though it happened after the election. You know that there's got to be a major indictment coming out. And when that comes out and it pinpoints that the people in the campaign were conspiring with the Russian government, the whole thing changes. One
thing you're missing, and I think people haven't talked about enough, is you're hearing in the conservative base world, okay, well, what has Mueller got to show for this? He spent $5 million. He's gotten George Papadopoulos, who arguably was on the periphery. He's gotten Manafort and Gates for things that weren't really related to the campaign, and he's gotten Flynn for lying to the FBI. It's time to end the investigation.
No.
Well, people have said we should, or if Trump fired Mueller, that would be a red line. Trump doesn't have to do that. The Bannon world is actually saying, get Congress. Congress to defund it, because they can't do their investigation if they don't have the money to fund it. And that's their sly way of trying to do it, and you're going to see it snowball.
All right, well, guess what? We have months
attack.
more to focus on this. We're going to take a break. And President Trump, if you're watching, I agree. Unfortunately, Mike Flynn's life has been ruined. But I'd like you to let us know who ruined it, because I'm pretty sure he did it himself. Well, you know, this is my favorite topic. Garrett, you better stay down there and pay attention to everything that happens today. And I want to break it down with my panel. I got somebody else, my dear friend, Vanity Fair special correspondent Bill Cohen, and Donna Brazil and Evan Siegfried still here. Bill, I go to you first. Republicans aren't going to run into any road bumps here. I mean, the fact that we're going through, is it 7 brackets or 4 brackets? That's window dressing. I mean, that postcard argument doesn't actually matter much.
Stephanie, as you know, this is, quote unquote, historic, right? This hasn't happened since 1986. So the Republicans aren't going to...
Listen, whether you like it or not, Bill, it is historic.
Okay, fine. It's part of history. It will one day be part of history. We know that's why your friend Gary Cohn stuck around to make this happen, why Steve Mnuchin is here to make this happen. I don't understand what they've accomplished or what they think they've accomplished, but you're right. They're not going to run into any roadblocks at this point. This is just, you know, the two groups getting together and figuring out the details, which, of course, as we know, God is in the details, and there's some crazy details here which I do not understand. But, you know, we're all glad, I guess, that our private jet exemption will be maintained, and we'll be fine with that.
Wow.
You know what? We're not all okay with
It
that.
takes money from the middle class. It takes money from the pocketbooks and the wallets of the middle class to give to the wealthy, which I don't understand. It blows a hole in the deficit. Now, you mentioned 13 million more Americans who will be uninsured. What about the 10% premium hike? We haven't talked about that. The revenue, it doesn't pay for itself. And I thought once upon a time the Republicans cared about the deficit. They just want a win at any cost, but this is going to cost middle-class taxpayers.
But who's going to own that deficit issue after this? Let's assume this goes through. The Senate tax bill adds $1 trillion to our
As
national
Republicans,
debt.
we should.
Who owns that?
The president campaigned on how the national debt was going to $21 trillion. It's almost $22 trillion now. And I was waiting to see what the dynamic score was, because that's what a lot of Republicans said when it was the $1.4 trillion added under the static score. And the dynamic score came out and it said it was only $1 trillion. Clearly, that's fine fiscal conservatism. No, it's not. We have a spending problem, which we haven't exactly fixed. And let's look at the SALT deduction, the elimination of that. You're eliminating it for the individual. On New Yorkers, that's a $72 billion tax hike. Right. On people in Oregon, the average Oregonian is going to pay $500 more. You could be quadruple taxed if you live in one county, work in another, and you're going to be quadruple taxed.
All of
but
these
lastly,
arguments, yes.
They're keeping it for corporations. Why not treat corporations the same as individuals? As an individual, why can't you deduct state and local income or taxes
Corporations
versus a
who,
corporation?
keep your eye, in 5 minutes the stock market is going to go open, and I assure you that puppy's going up. Corporations have been sitting pretty since the financial crisis. All these arguments, though, we've been making them for weeks. It doesn't matter. Once this thing goes through, is the Senate going to use this as an excuse to go after programs like Social Security, Medicare? You're going to see huge Medicare cuts straight out of the gate.
Well, because now they're going to have to, quote, deal with the deficit. I mean, this could very well be, Stephanie, the first quote-unquote tax cut, you know, we could debate whether it really is, that is going to cause a recession. You've got the national debt going up. You've got the annual budget deficits going up. The deduction for state and local taxes, which you quickly mentioned, could, in fact, cause a huge hole in people's pocketbooks, because they're going to feel much less wealthy, because the cost of owning a home is going to go up dramatically. And you're going to see, I think, a situation where you have tax cuts for corporations that don't need them, right? You've got tax cuts for wealthy partners of partnerships who don't need them. And so for the average rank and file human being in this country, this is going to make them feel much less well off, and we're going to see people not opening their wallets at a time when they should be, and you're going to cause a recession.
And again,
Guaranteed.
you do expand the child tax credit, but think about all of those families who don't pay any taxes. It's not going to benefit them. And think about all the life-saving programs they're dependent on that they will lose. In fact, a huge portion of people who are eligible to get even the earned income tax credit don't know how to file their taxes, and they never get that money.
Right.
Do you think the president should be worried, Corey, that Michael Flynn is about to turn on him?
I don't think so, and let me tell you why. If Mike Flynn was not honest with the FBI, and that's what he's been accused of, and that's what he's pled guilty to, is lying to the FBI, that's a crime that Mike is responsible for and has nothing to do with the president.
Former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski this morning insisting the president's got nothing to worry about in special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. And I need to ask my panel about that. Donna, Evan, with me. Okie doke. Corey Lewandowski and David Bossie sat down with Today, and they are making this argument, let Trump be Trump. Talk about the timing of this book and that they're out there saying Trump's got absolutely nothing to worry about.
And I'm going on a date with Jennifer Lawrence later. Let Trump be Trump. Look what letting Trump be Trump has gotten us to, a special counsel. He was Trump when he fired James Comey, and that brought about the special counsel. I think that it's terrible advice. And what they're saying, and Corey Lewandowski's saying about, oh, they got Mike Flynn on just lying to the FBI, it's not really a big deal. This is where the investigation's going. No, this is how a very long, swift, and methodical investigation goes forward. They start nibbling at the fish, the smaller pieces, and they get them to turn. It's like you take down a drug cartel, the mob, or a massive criminal conspiracy. So they should be worried, but if they want to project an alternate reality, they have the right to be dumb.
I think they should be worried, especially in light of the fact that we are learning so much more than just what we're hearing from Director Mueller. Look, both the House and the Senate investigations have uncovered things that we didn't know about. We didn't know that Facebook and Twitter and others were paid with rubles. We didn't know about the so-called meetings or the behind-the-scenes conversations that were taking place between WikiLeaks and perhaps Donald Trump Jr. So they should be worried. But look, when I haven't read the book. I hope to read it after I finish my own book tour. But I have to tell you, and looking at some of the salacious details, the president's diet. I mean, I've been on a lot of campaigns, but my God, his diet. I mean, he is Mr. Junk Food.
He is Mr. Junk Food.
But his doctor says he's in the best health of any human being ever. I mean,
That's
McDonald's is
serious.
clearly the healthiest food
My
you
doctor
can eat.
won't let me near some of the Oreo.
I'm not even allowed to read that without gaining weight.
All right. What stood out to me, President Trump, David Bossie again said President Trump, he did say those things on the Access Hollywood tape. Billy Bush put out a powerful op-ed that said, Mr. President, you absolutely said it. And I wonder, that Access Hollywood tape hasn't been litigated. People looked at it and voted for President Trump anyway. I wonder what it does to the white suburban female voter who voted for President Trump, who now hears the stories that behind closed doors he's denying saying those words in that video. It just doesn't make sense to me. And today, he's got a 33% approval rating.